includes recruitment, the system of care committees, but we also added listening sessions. We also use the system of grant to support and connect to existing youth and family groups. And the outcomes, in terms of outcomes, we have increased youth and family voice in our system of care and in our barrier work. So then you look at goal 2, and one of our goals is to collectively, as a system of care, support those essential services of an effective system of care. And at the time, the Oregon Health Authority was developing the mobile response and stabilization services and intensive in-home behavioral health treatment programs. And we really wanted to align and support this effort along with those other crucial services. So in terms of outcomes, we have seen a growth in the Flex Fund model through Agile funds across our region. We have seen a growth in peer support. We have seen the development of MRSS and IIBHT, which didn't exist. We did use our System of Care grant to fund crisis training for parents. And our system partners are working on expanding and connecting care coordination programs in our region. And during the last System of Care grant, our members did choose to fund gaps that were identified by youth and families and providers who represent them in these specific services. And through our System of Care grant partners, we were able to serve over 10,000 youth with peer support, informal respite, and meeting basic needs. So now moving to goal 3. So at the time, I was supporting the Siletz tribe by encouraging them to apply for the System of Care travel grant. And now I don't have to do that, which is fantastic. And I had hoped at the time that we wrote this that the grants committee would encourage a greater connectivity between the tribes and System of Cares with the travel grant. But that has not been the case. And so while we want to continue to support tribal youth, I'm not sure we're going to keep that goal moving forward of the 4 goals. I mean, we'll word it in a different way rather than through the System of Care travel grant. And then finally, goal 4 is we want to continue to support the work we do, which is cross-sector and collaborative systems improvement work. And here are some projects that I and System of Care members are a part of if you want to talk about outcomes. So ODHS, self-sufficiency, System of Care, and the Early Learning Hub created a base camp site so system partners can share upcoming resources for youth and families. And we have 113 community partners posting information and sharing via their networks. The Education Service District has a resource guide that they include in their email signature that I also include in my own email signature. And my System of Care interns help them update it at least once a year. I and IHN are supporting our Education Service District in applying for a federal SAMHSA grant. If it posts, fingers crossed. And I'm supporting community partners currently in applying for an AmeriCorps grant. IHN funded Youth Era to stand up a youth advisory council, as well as provide peer support in our region. And I'm on their steering committee, and System of Care is a partner in this work. And then when we revise the plan, my sense is members want to also align the goals that we're going to include in our next strategic plan with our regional community health improvement plan, as well as the new SOCAC strategic plan. So that's our strategic plan in a nutshell.
That's great. Thanks, Jennifer. Like how simple it is. Any questions for Jennifer? You make it sound so simple.
Right? Jennifer, I have a question. But first of all, I love that desk. I love that desk in the back there. It's a desk, right?
Yes.
It's beautiful. So my question is on goal 1. You said that you got feedback from, I'm assuming it's the youth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how did you guys do that? How did you get feedback? How did you learn what they wanted, what they needed?
Well, it's not enough, but we hosted a listening session and we partnered
Okay.
with a community-based organization who serves youth. And so we were able to host a listening session, and through our System of Care grant, we support them with standing up basically a youth council. And so the idea is that they will share information about what's working and what's not working with us. We haven't closed that loop yet. I need to do that. It's just a bandwidth issue, and Andrea will share that information with me. I just need to reach out to her and collect that. So
Okay.
that's been our
Okay.
primary mechanism. Again, it's not enough. You know, one listening session is not enough. We now have our coordinated care organization is funding Youth Era to stand up a youth advisory council. And it's not just a youth advisory council, they're also they do listening sessions. So if a youth doesn't want to participate in the advisory council, they can just reach out to Youth Era and say, hey, I want to, I want to share my ideas with you and my thoughts with you. And so they're doing that. And they've already, since April 1st, they've already had two of those
Wow.
sessions. So they are collecting feedback from youth. And it's
Okay.
really, I'm just so excited about that program.
Yeah,
Okay, thank
we
you.
have a North Coast Youth Advisory Council as well, and they are fantastic. I got to meet with them, I guess last month, and I was just so impressed. Like, it gives me hope for the future. These youth that are caring about these things and getting involved, and it's just a great group.
Yeah, and I can also share. This may be true in your regions as well. Through, I think it's alcohol and drug funding in Lincoln County and Lynn County, we have youth groups. And one of them in Lincoln County also wanted to expand their role. And so they are using Systemic Care grant funding to create a Healthy Communities Youth Council. And they do all kinds of amazing work. And they are also collecting, information about what's working and not working in Lincoln County. And that will eventually be shared with me too. It's just slow. It's like we try to develop these mechanisms for bringing youth voice in, and it just takes time. But I'm really hopeful that's going to be a really great way for youth to be heard.
All right, great work, Jennifer. Any other questions for Jennifer about strategic planning? All right. Selby or Heather, do either of you want to share a little bit? It's like Selby's pointing to Heather.
I see that.
Okay.
I was watching the gesture to see what else she was gonna do.
Do you want me
Yeah,
to pull up your plan, Heather?
if you want to.
Okay.
So in Marion Polk, we hit a point at which I think we were just really looking for some foundational materials and kind of foundational understanding of what it was that we wanted to do, which direction we wanted to head, and to have something that kind of served as a backbone for when we got stuck, what else can we resort to, or what can we look back to help guide us forward? And knowing that the vague strategic plan language was also in the contract that helps guide you in the right direction too. But in one of the previous grant cycles, we partnered with Portland State University System of Care Institute, so Brooke Reiser, to kind of embark on this pretty long strategic planning process. It took us about a year and a half to develop this, but really keeping in mind that we wanted this to be intentional, being that this would be the one time we do this for the couple of years that this spans. And I would say that this is going to span beyond 2025. We were just guessing when we put the date on this document that you see here, but we also wanted to really take the time to be able to engage with community in ways that we hadn't prior, or reaching out to pockets of the community that just rarely get reached out to. So we really took that time and had to take a lot of pauses in between things when things took longer than we thought. And so it just ended up being a long process. But through the strategic planning process, we hosted a series of workshops where we engaged community partners who aren't formal system of care members. And we really looked through like a holistic lens. So anybody we didn't have sitting at the table that spoke to, a different sector, a different industry, so to speak, or like a different portion of the lens that makes up children, youth, and family wellness. We really tried to seat someone on that workshop or within that workshop, or ensure that they were going to participate to make sure that we got as full spectrum of a lens as we could in requesting what feedback we could get from community partners and community members around what it was that they want to see changed in the community with regard to children, youth, and family services. So we hosted, I think it was like 4 workshops with community partners where we blasted an invite out far and wide, and then again did some targeted outreach to just ensure that we had key partners at the table. And then in between each of these workshops where we were gathering broader feedback, we brought all of that information back to the system of care members to really make sure that it was grounded in what the team and teams are capable of doing. So we have a couple of different, we just call them teams. I know they are committees in other regions, but we really wanted to make sure that while we were collecting feedback and really wanting to be responsive to that, that it also fell within the scope of the teams and kind of the willingness of the group, knowing that if you create a strategic plan that no one wants to do, it's not going to go anywhere. So we went through a SWOT analysis to just, try to identify what's going well, what's not going well, what different types of things do community partners see as, areas where we could lean into. And then really built from there. So we tried to pull out themes and we tried to categorize, and each step of the way brought that information back to those community partners that engaged in the workshops, again, to get their feedback, then brought it back to system of care to ground it in the mission, vision, values, and kind of the group dynamic, so to speak. So with that, we collected a lot of community partner feedback, and then it was time to make sure that we heard from our community members as well. So youth and families and, folks closest to them. So we partnered with 3 culturally specific community-based organizations. So Mano a Mano, Conniff Consulting, and the Oregon Marshallese Community Association to more broadly be able to send out a survey to community members and really get feedback. So these contracted partners helped us to get this survey at youth events and family events and places where youth and families are just already coming together with their trusted partners. So like the Oregon Marshallese Community Association, they do a lot of services with the Marshallese community. So that was really targeted toward them. Conniff Consulting is Russian Old Believer and Ukrainian community focused. And so really helping us to figure out how to best speak to that community and reach out there as well. And then Mano a Mano is a primarily Latino community focused. And so kind of trying to really lean on our partners to help do outreach in that space. And then all of the system of care partners that we have, as well as those that were engaged with workshops, we were asking them to send out the survey as well. And we ended up with over 250 responses, which was pretty incredible. And those were responses that did span all of the communities that we were attempting to outreach to, and spanned quite an age range as well. So we were pretty proud of the fact that we were able to get such diverse feedback. Obviously, that's not enough. That is a first step, and that was, our attempt at really working to practice toward this outreach and trying to be really intentional in getting that feedback. But a lot of what we heard was around wanting to know more about system of care. How do we get engaged? How can system of care be engaged in places where youth and families are already engaging with one another and where they have trusted spaces? Also, how do we get engaged in other community partner efforts? And what they're doing. So there were a lot of goals within that that plan that Christy sent out, and we don't necessarily have to look at it, but just overarching goals that had to do with really building the foundations of system of care to make sure that we are efficient and effective partners in not only what we do at our own table, but in other tables as well. And then also some educational and awareness opportunities. So folks wanted like lunch and learns, and they wanted to hear more about the barrier busting process, and then also figure out how to connect youth and families in to really help us achieve the goal of system of care work being youth and family driven and guided. And then at that time, there was also a really heavy emphasis on workforce and resource centers and events. And I don't think that's necessarily gone away, but was a little bit more of a vague request. So you'll see in that plan that there's a little bit more of a robust set of action steps, or like, maybe bucketed projects in there underneath the system of care awareness and foundation setting, a little bit less so in terms of the resource center event thing and also the workforce goal. So we tried to keep this broad enough that there were opportunities to explore different requests and different things that we were hearing, but also where we had identified certain action steps or projects, which are these things where you can like check the box next to them. We kind of look at them as projects where we further have to develop action steps based on what it is we're trying to achieve there. But we tried to leave some flexibility, knowing that things change over time. And, we heard from our system of care members that we didn't want to set this and then have blinders up to everything else that's going on in the world either. So wanting to remain flexible, but also wanting to tend to things that the community really surfaced for us. So from there, we have had this strategic plan for, I think, about a year. And we are currently working on building out those additional action steps, as well as integrating a couple of new projects that we identified through some belonging work we've been doing with a consultant locally. And so trying to bring our focus on belonging and inclusion work into the fold underneath these projects as well, and just kind of keep that in I don't know, in our sights, I suppose. So really working to build out those action steps and then identify different partners that want to lead these different projects, knowing that I can't coordinate all of these on my own. We've gotten a lot of volunteers to support the projects, not so much lead them, but very excited that people do have passion around these different bodies of work and are interested in supporting that. So that's kind of where we're at.
So cool, Heather. And so different. Like I love how different these plans can look and feel. So can you talk a little bit about how you use this? Like, do you bring this actively to a group? Like, how often do you review it? Like, how are you using it to like direct?
Yeah. So I think I've talked in a couple of spaces about how we did a system of care restructure. So our teams have different names and kind of they have all the responsibilities of the normal team or of the normal committees that we all have, but they shook out a little bit differently. So our visioners team, which is essentially our executive council, is actively looking at this strategic plan right now. That was part of why I wanted it graphic designed, was so that when it comes back up, everyone does an eye roll and sigh. They get to look at something pretty and hopefully semi-engaging. So we do bring this back up and are in the process of taking each of those goals and the different projects underneath, so all those boxes that can be checked. We've pulled them out and put them into a work plan, which is essentially a very large Excel sheet that is color-coded based on which goal it falls under, which project it falls under, and then adding in the action steps. This work plan has many tabs and then identifies which team it falls under. So maybe it's something that falls within the visioners, if it's like a foundation setting, being that they really look at the overarching vision for system of care for us. And then there's a couple of things that really fall in the purview of our barrier busting team in terms of, having communication materials around what barrier busting is, how we partner with community partners in our community to gather those, as well as youth and families. So we're trying to really piece out which project goes in which team and then bring that to that team and have them identify within their group who would like to lead it, who would like to support it. And if we have no support at all, revisiting, is that a priority for us right now? Do we want to back burner it? Do we want to take it out altogether? Or do we need to recruit more people in to kind of support us in doing that?
That's great. So definitely not something that's just sitting out there on the website, but something like you actively.
No, yeah, we're
and
actively
use in
using
your
it, which
meeting.
is really
Yeah,
fun.
that's always the hard part, I think.
Super hard, yes. Yeah.
That's great. Anybody got questions for Heather? All right.
Wait, I have a quick one.
Yeah.
Heather, hi. I followed up with you about this, like asking about, the price of utilizing the sockeye and things. Did they have like levels of packages, or was it like they could do a strategic plan in a certain amount of time? Like, I know I can do all this research myself, but I'm just curious, like, did you all elect to have a longer process, or, or their options. And full disclosure, I'm saying that just because we could never afford currently maybe what was done, that some of you and your amazing investment in consultants, which definitely shows in all of the strengths of your SOC. So job well done.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think so. I don't know if they have prepackaged options at this point. When we engaged with Sockeye, we spent a good chunk of time talking about what it is that we hope to develop. Again, that real emphasis on wanting to take the time that it takes to properly do this. And some of that for us at that point was really spending some time regrounding in system of care philosophy and rebuilding our mission, vision, values to set the scene for us to really be able to do that as well. So I think that did add a little bit of time. If you were better poised at that moment to do that, there might be a chunk of it that you could cut out. I also think if you said, I only have 3 months to do this, they can definitely do that. I think they just write up a proposal based on what you need and kind of make adjustments that way. But yeah, we just kind of had a conversation about really wanting to be intentional and take the time that we need to do it so that we do it right the first time, if that makes sense.
It sure does. I sure do appreciate it. And I sure do appreciate getting to benefit from all of you and your very, very smart investments.
Danny's got a question. How long have each of you had your system of care active? Curious how long it took you to establish a more formal framework like a strategic plan versus just trying to get your feet under you. Great question. I mean, I think all of you, all the CCOs have had this in contract for the same time, but the implementation and how quickly those systems have gotten started really varies. So
So I was hired in October of 2018. So it was before the governance structure was hired in contract. And I remember at the time, I think I felt like I'm the only coordinator in the whole state. I finally kind of ran across Chris at some meeting. I think Nat had created a meeting where we came together. But even then, I think, Chris, you were split between different duties. But anyway, at the time, I remember I finally connected with Sockeye, and I remember they provided me, like, they had a map of system of care in Oregon at the time. And I think system of care prior to 2020, it was mostly wraparound implementation, and that there weren't really so much like the governance structures. I feel like since 2020, like I've seen so many governance structures come online. But like to Danny's point, like, so it's been in Tri-County for over 10 years. Like they used to have a system of care governance structure in each county. There was one in Multnomah, 3 committees in Multnomah, 3 committees in Washington County, and 3 committees in Clackamas. So we had 9 committees in the region, and they, in 2018, with support from Sockeye, they went through a regionalization process to go from whatever 9 committees in 3 counties to 3. And I was hired at the very end of that regionalization process. And then I feel like we just worked with kind of, when I came in, like I did not like try to stir stuff up or do anything new. They had just gone through this regionalization process. I think they were a little angry and a little tired, and they had all had to give up something. And in fact, like Multnomah County didn't dissolve its executive council till like a year later because they weren't sure that they were going to get the representation they wanted in this regional structure. And we kind of just operated on the format that had originally been there, right? That you send things up the hierarchy from practice level work group to executive. And then after a couple years of that, and whatever changes happened and pandemics happened and stuff, feeling like, oh, we're not getting the results we want, let's do consulting in 2023. So I actually feel like my region went through these 3, if you think of a organization or a structure like a living, developing thing, so to speak. I feel like we went through these 3 phases of development of where they had county-based structures, did that for 3 or 4 years, a regional structure for 3 or 4 years. And so now I feel like we're on our next, like, okay, well, now we're a regional structure and we've redone ourselves kind of according to the modern times to center equity, to have a forward-looking strategic plan. Like we really want to hone in and be robust, that it's kind of been this natural push and evolution, but it's, but that readjustment every 3 or 4 years, I think was appropriate, I think, given, again, between regionalization and a pandemic, I think it's all been appropriate, but it's definitely been this growing arc. But that's kind of the way I feel like where my structure has evolved. So that's kind of a long answer, but I was going to.
No, that's really helpful background, Selby. It's hard with these types of initiatives when, people move on and the history often gets lost. It's so important. So really appreciate those of you who've been around for a while and can kind of bring some of the story forward. Chris?
I was just going to say that along a little bit with Selby, I was hired in September of 2014 and was hired as a wraparound care coordinator, but didn't actually start wraparound until 2015, like January, February. But was then like, hey, we're rolling out systems of care. And so we had our practice level work groups and our review committees combined from January of 2015, because we had to get that sort of that groundwork. And so I spent the first few months just kind of getting that groundwork and doing all of that. And then we realized that just trying to separate into 4 separate committees was going to be too much. So we just were like, okay, we're going to let the review committee, even though they're separate, happen back to back with the practice level work group. And then our advisory and executive councils are going to be combined, except in Umatilla County, where it's a little bit different. And then they have had different iterations of their advisory and executive have combined and then broken apart and combined and broken apart. And now they're broken apart. So just kind of different iterations. And I have 12 counties that are vastly different in kind of like what they really want to do versus how they want to do things. And so we did decide for the strategic plan is that we were just going to take the 4 pillars and then identify how does each county want to do that. And they want it for the state strategic plan, because trying to create 12 strategic plans, nobody wanted to do it. And I said, all right, can we? What do you think of this? And so we talk about the strategic plan and how the barrier busting process is. And we just did a Systems of Care 101 and then a barrier busting 101 presentation that we're like redoing, because our people have changed so much, and trying to pull them like into and like here align with all the things that we're trying to do. So we've had Systems of Care since about September of 2014, as far as like getting it on the ground. And then at one point I had 15 counties that I was covering because I had Corinne's counties. So I had Corinne's counties that we were doing Systems of Care for as well. And then we were doing wraparound a little bit in those counties. And then oh my gosh, was that 5 years ago? Then they went to a different CCO. And so yes, I agree with Selby. It felt lonely.
Yeah. You've seen a lot of change. Could you share your strategic plan that you have for the region?
So it's inside of our like practice, our notes as far as each county. We just have it was verbal. It wasn't written
Oh, you
out.
didn't have
It was
anything
just
written.
conversations. We did not write it out. When I'm looking at these, I was like, oh. And now I have a team, and I think we can start to work towards some of that.
Yeah.
With team, but as we just were putting it into notes, like how we're gonna do family and youth voice, and we're gonna really build and spend our dollars on that, or bust barriers locally and things like that. So that happened inside notes more than it happened inside or minutes than happened as a document. Mm-hmm. But now that I'm looking at the documents, I'm like, oh, we're probably missing out on some of that.
Danny, did you get your question answered?
I did. There's so many times where I'm just like, I feel like I'm just spinning my wheels, but then I have to remember, like, my region is a baby in this work. This is literally only our second year actively doing it. They kind of tried in one of the counties one year and it just didn't succeed. And so we really are still just building it from the ground up. And I'm trying to be patient with myself about that. And I had no idea that some of you had been doing this for upwards of 10 plus years. So it's nice to have a little bit of a scope. Yeah.
Yeah, just like a time frame, kind of where you're at. Yeah.
Almost envious of yours, Danny, though, the getting to start fresh aspect for those of us who have come in on ones that have been around for a while and recognizing that things were just done differently, right? Like there used to be a lot of formality in the Lane County SOC, like Robert's Rules type stuff. And we technically do have a strategic plan, but I chose not to share it because we aren't operating under it. It was created 3 system of care coordinators ago, and it happened right before the pandemic, and like nothing got accomplished from it. So it is very challenging at times to have folks that have been around, community system partners who've been around since the very beginning. And here I am bringing in as much youth voice as I can and family voice, and we're just shaking stuff up on this formality. And it's a lot of like people, I think, getting nervous, getting out of their comfort zone. So anyways, I think grass is always greener. And so there's a lot of pros to what you're getting to do too. And I know you're doing an amazing job because I get to hear it from our shared Pacific Source partners.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Haley, right? Like people come and go, right? And oftentimes you might step into this work and you're inheriting stuff that maybe is not what you would have wanted to create, or you've inherited a culture or documents or systems, right? And it's like really hard to pivot and change once those things are in place. Yeah, Chris.
So one of the things that I realized just recently, like in the last 8 months for me, was that so many things have changed, and instead of releasing, like, does this serve us? Is this doing? It's like our team is just like we just add stuff, which is why I think it's become a little bit overwhelming. I like that the new start where Danny, you get that new start because I have so much of that history and like where we are and where we came from and all of that. It's almost like I've just started looking at all of the things that we do, and should we be doing it? Is this how we should be doing it? So that has started to have, because I have a whole new team recently and just having those conversations. So I also am kind of envious of that new start because I don't realize maybe I can let go of stuff. Like I don't have to do that, or I don't have to carry that. So
yeah,
that's something I've realized just recently.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is the beauty of the strategic plan, right? Is that it helps you to kind of like refocus, reprioritize, and especially important system of care, right? Where like there's no way we can do everything and do that well, right? But this plan allows us to get very clear about our shared priorities and the things that we're going to work on for the next few years. Yeah. Selby.
At the risk of reiterating the point a third time, I will also admit that like when Tracy started doing her consulting process in 2023, the same time I was, I had that same feeling of for me, what it was really coming down to was that even though, we talk about system of care has the value to be culturally responsive, I just felt like the learning across the spectrum of moving kind of from this idea of cultural responsiveness or cultural humility to really getting into equity and anti-racism, like that spectrum was so much more profound and deep. And that as a new structure, you could start off with this really in-depth new learnings and focus on equity in a way that my structure just kind of always parroting the 3 system of care values of we're community based and culturally responsive, like to really like move kind of from parroting those values to this deep sense of like, we want to kind of figure out this equity piece. And so that's where I felt like what a great time in 2020 for the new structures coming online. to get to really start from this point of more robust learning around equity. And so I think that that's really important. And then also, yeah, you've all heard me talk before about how I felt like there were some kind of significant, like old ideas or habits we had to break. That system of care was not a committee name, like it's an actual framework, and we're going to get into it. So, anyway, just kind of wanted to mention that equity piece and how exciting I think it is that you could really get into that.
Thanks, Selby. Haley.
Yes, I don't know if any of you get kind of self-conscious about how often, some of the work is some of these like paperwork oriented processes. And for a group, my system of care for many years prior to me, they were not updating and kind of adhering to some of the things that kind of keep that kind of structure, boundary, guardrails. And so something I learned from Joylene actually, and it's like transformed how I approach when it's one of these more like procedural tasks, is calling it table setting, right? Like we are setting the table so that we all know like what brings us to the table, and using that language. Like I'm noticing that other people are using it that I work with. And I don't know about you all, I used to call it housekeeping, and that never felt great to me because I felt like it was a derogatory against housekeeping, which I personally really enjoy. So table setting, hot tip, hot take, table setting. Thanks, Joylene.
I love that. Thank you, Haley. I also think there's a lot of value in strategic planning when it comes to addressing this challenge, I think is common in this work of like uh articulating the value, right? And the importance of this work. And I think a strategic plan naturally drives you to that conversation, right? Like we're going to have a conversation about what's bringing us all together, what's like what is going to be on the table, right? Like what are the placemats going to look like? What are the plates going to look like? Are we going to have flowers? Are we going to have candles? Like what are we putting on this table? And just like that exercise of doing that in community with people, I think might address some of the challenges that we often have in like getting people to understand what it is we're doing and how it's different but not and also connected, right, to all these other things. All right. Thank you all for this rich conversation. So lovely. Selby, oh, Jennifer, go for it. Saw you
I
come
was
off.
yes, I was just gonna wanted to share something that we struggle with and just get feedback. So we struggle with defining our population, our shared population, and I feel like we've had different iterations over time. Like we've focused really on kids with complex needs, kids who are multi-system involved, kids with a behavioral health focus, because that crosses all systems. And I feel like right now it's, our population of focus is, young people with complex needs, 0 to sometimes we say 21, sometimes we say 25. I think we're at 25 right now, uh, who are also involved in, 2 or more systems. But that's such a broad population that I think it's hard for our members to um, be able to see where they can make an impact because it's so broad. And sometimes I think we end up really focusing on behavioral health because those are the barriers that come up the most often. But that may also be because that's our structure may actually be designed to create those barriers, the fact that those are the barriers that rise up. And anyways, sometimes I just want to, right now, I kind of want to focus on behavioral health services, but then I know we're not supposed to. But then I feel if it's so broad, it's hard to get a foothold. I guess that's just a struggle that I've been having, and I think our system of care has been having. And I was wondering how other people felt as we go into the strategic planning process.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. That is like such an important question that has like not been clearly answered for me, at least in the little time that I've been in this work. And I just to say, like, I don't think the state councils been helpful in terms of like creating a definition that we can all get behind. So yeah, I mean that is part of the hope that I think the council has for the next strategic plan is that we get a little bit clearer. That there was a priority population identified in the state plan, which is young people involved in 3 or more systems. But to your point, like, what does that mean exactly? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Like, what systems are we talking about, right? It was, I don't know. And we definitely have not been using that as guardrails in council conversations, right? So there's something about that definition and that population that hasn't been, I think, particularly helpful from a strategic planning perspective. So do folks have kind of identified populations, or maybe this is maybe a bigger conversation that we could carry to a future collaborative? Selby?
Yeah, so if I can share one thing for a second, this might speak to our process, but to Jennifer's point a little bit too. So like one thing we did as we prepared to do intra-strategic planning process, we did this kind of current state and future state analysis, and I've blown it up so you can see it. It's got a couple columns here, but you can see at the top that one of the things we said was, well, we have too broad of a population focus and too expansive of a mission. Like we wanted to help all the kids in all the places all the time. And so it was really trying to be clear with ourselves that we wanted to look at a collective impact process and work with this consultant because we wanted an identifiable and easily stated vision and mission that all of the members can recite. And we do have like a long definition of we want to reduce out of home placements by 25%, 0 to 21 in Tri-County area. But all of my members can at least say the first part of we're reducing out of home placements. Like they can, like whenever they say that in a meeting, I'm like, oh my gosh, yay, somebody can do it. But so I think that part of this work, has been learning to cut stuff out and that people can feel uncomfortable with that. But also I was thinking as Jennifer was talking, I think what's really set up guardrails for us, even though we did define a population for ourselves, it's still pretty broad, right? Like kids 0 to 21 with multi-system involvement. I feel like the population focus is still kind of broad, but what's really narrowed us down is that goal, because it's like we're driving towards that one goal now. That's where we want our energy to go, right? This idea of reducing out of home placements, and that we don't pick up and work on barriers if we don't think it's going to drive that goal forward. And so I think it's really the North Star goal that has set the boundaries up more so than the priority population, which was kind of a new reflection for me as I was listening to Jennifer. So I don't know, that might be something worth exploring. Like, what is your boundary setting? Is it the population or the goal you set for yourself?
Yeah, that's a great point, Selby. Just reflecting on like the statute, right? The ORS for SOCAC at least. Is that the plan? Services and supports for mental and behavioral health and people with intellectual or developmental disabilities. I mean, per the statute, that is just naturally going to be a very large group of people. If you align with that definition. Anybody else have an example of how they've thought about priority population or helped narrow scope a little bit? I think like the idea of prioritization is a hard but necessary part of strategic planning.
I would also say we really struggled with this idea of like positive and negative system engagement, right? Like we would like more kids to be getting behavioral health services they need, but we would like fewer kids in juvenile justice, and really kind of working out like within that priority population, like where within all those different systems they kind of fall across. Like that was a struggle for us too, of like, okay, well, we have maybe these priority systems, but then there's like supplementary engagement in this other area. So that was another thing we kind of wrestled with.
this is all very helpful. And also just to share that, like, I think that it benefits us all that there is this flexibility so far. I know that people have kind of mentioned that any type of like rigidity would really like upset, especially for those like more established SOCs. I think I have high hopes for the SOCAC strategic plan because I'm really looking for like something to align to, right? And like with still some flexibility for Lane County. But yes, I will just share that we have gotten Family Voice involved over the past year, and they are specifically coming from kind of like the IDD lens and having kids in have negative experiences navigating the education system and things. And so it does feel like, our SOC could go that way. It has almost been like we're afraid of breaking the rules. And so we're like, oh, wait, but we're supposed to have like all the barriers. And, but so seeing Selby, seeing your SOC kind of get more specific and stuff, it's been very inspiring. I can't tell you how often I've referenced all of your SOCs. I've been like, well, in Jackson County, they're doing this, you know what I mean? So, because it just helps. It helps give like, well, we can do that too. So just keep it up, everybody.
Thanks, Haley. All right, I'm just doing time check. It's 10 o'clock. Want to make sure I answer your questions as it relates to the grant requirements. Selby, is there anything else you want to say about your plan? It's also attached to the calendar appointment, so it's also a very different example.
Yeah. I actually had a few slides, and perhaps lucky for y'all, I lost them. I had created a few slides, but I went to find them this morning, and the file's there and it's blank. So I don't know what magical computer thing happened to make that happen. But I would just say, like, first off, I'm very jealous of Heather's beautiful like slide deck. I have some PowerPoint slides for my plan. The document that Christy attached, it's really text heavy, but it was kind of the initial work we did based on the style of the consultant we had. But I would say think about what kind of plan you're wanting, because you've seen an example of really streamlined stuff. And as I remember when Pam was here, like they had an external consultant come in. Tracy went through a very different type of process than I did in 2023. So we decided we wanted the plan, and we were interested in collective impact. So first we ran a small work group to see if we were ready for collective impact, because there's considered to kind of be pre-existing conditions that make collective impact a good model for your community or not. Then I spent an entire year working with that consultant. And somebody said something earlier about like, are you building on or are you stopping and shaking up? I mean, like other work stopped for a year. Like I heard from OHA, we noticed you haven't submitted new barriers. And I was like, yeah, we have collected barriers for a year, because I was bowled over by the consulting process. And so we really stopped everything and shook it up, which I think for us was really needed. And then even after the consultant left, we had to drill down, I think, a little bit farther into what we wanted to do. Somebody asked about price earlier. We used $65,000 from our SOCAC grant to fund that year-long process. I think we had over 300 hours of consultant work. So, I mean, we really went far into it. Some of you have heard me mention that part of that was I had an individual like coaching session once a month with a consultant, and that was invaluable. If you do anything, like, I can't stress this idea of using your grant to buy yourself some mentoring every month. Like that was just really key to it. And then just a quick couple lessons learned, which was kind of how I was approaching coming today on my slides. I lost one was that I know like it's very easy to doubt ourselves in this work. And I kind of tend to take things personally, unfortunately, always working on that. But my husband actually said to me one day, like, this is just a work problem you have to solve. It's not personal. And that was really helpful. So I would put that out there when you're feeling worried about your systems of care, because I have to remember that when he said that to me, like, this is just a work problem you need to solve. And then I think also I got kind of confused myself or tangled up in this idea of like, well, how much direction am I supposed to provide, and how much is all of this supposed to magically percolate up from my community and they start this big movement? And It was kind of like, well, who's supposed to suggest what? And I had to reground myself again in something the consultant told me, which is give them something to react to. Like it, and my supervisor also said to me, I had some quotes on my lessons learned slide. My supervisor said, well, you've been listening to them, for however many months now. What do you think they should be doing? And I was able to list off like, oh, based on what they tell me, I think they would want to focus in like one of these 8 areas. And then they were able to choose 2. But remembering that it's just, yeah, I need to constantly take whatever they tell me and repackage it and send it back to them. And as somebody else said to me, they'll tell you if you're wrong. So you can see I kind of hear these quotes from sometimes that really stick with me. But just kind of remembering, like, as you listen to them through the strategic planning process, just keep bringing it back to them and they'll affirm or not for you what's going on. And that I lost a little bit of time in there. Like I said, I think I was waiting for some magical process to percolate up where we were going to start a movement or something. And then the other kind of interesting place that I'm in right now with all of this is, so we had, I think sometimes I don't know what comes first, kind of that chicken or the egg thing. Like, do you do some kind of analysis first and identify one thing that you're all going to pursue forward together and make a work plan? Or do you kind of, I don't know, like I was trying to create a work plan recently for my system of care. And one of my health share colleagues was kind of inferring we were doing things backwards. And I was like, oh my God, well, we spent a whole year with that consultant. Like, I don't really understand how we could have like done things backward. And I don't think we did, but I'm just saying, like, it can be kind of hard to figure out what to do and which direction to go. And when it came to creating like my structure, yeah, they are like ready to go to work. And they said, we are ready for an action plan or a project plan. And I felt like I couldn't really support them to create like a standard strategic plan of just, here's our idea, here's our timeline, here's who's responsible. Like, it didn't feel like it was going to fit that format. And because they hadn't decided like one thing that they were all going to do the exact same thing to reach our strategic goal. So I was really looking at I had to really lean back into our system of care value, that the systems are coordinated, and also the collective impact value of reinforcing activities of like, how do you create some kind of plan across 6 different systems when they're all doing something different, but you want all those different things to drive to the same goal. And that's what my challenge has been, was taking the strategic plan to the next place. The last month I was working on this, and I'm just now, Christy was at the very first workshop where I was like, I hope I'm rolling this out the right way, but I'm just now running a series of small meetings where I hope we're building kind of this inventory, if you will, of all the different things they're doing that are driving to the same goal. And we're going to use that to really be coordinating their work. But it's really confusing work. I am not a collective impact expert. And just kind of, again, realizing your committee it's going to you have to learn as you go along with your committee. And I'll try and stop my rambling here, but those were kind of the things I wanted to highlight and pull out. And I guess the other one challenge I'd mentioned with this work is I actually had made this little graphic on my missing slides where I had 2 like people talking to me. I have one health share colleague who's always like, do the work. Why are you making this work plan right now, Selby? Nobody's going to look at it. And to which I said, over my dead body, we're going to be looking at this all the time. But she's always like, do the work, take action, too much processing. What are you doing? And then I have this other family advocate over here who has collective impact experience. And she's always like, trust the process. The miracles will start to happen. The leadership will emerge. And I feel constantly torn between the two. So we talk a lot in our work about you got to have both and they're like my primary example of that, of like, I'm constantly like trying to balance those two. And I think that's where it gets into this idea of like, listen to what they're telling you, but reflect it back to them between meetings kind of thing. But just to acknowledge, like, there's this tension between, as you work on your plans, people are going to be like, let's go to work and get it done. And yet that's not how it takes. So I appreciated earlier when Heather said it took us over a year, because yeah, we did a year of consulting process. Last year was our first year of implementation. You have to get used to what you're doing. The work picks up slow. So just allow that time. And Seems like I had one other brilliant thought to share and I've lost it, so I'll stop.
Selby, that's great. I'm gonna hold on to that talking head thing for a while. So it is. You articulated it really well. Yeah, and just to say, like from SOCAC's perspective, I'm like right here with you all in the midst of like strategic planning and the challenge and like the tension between like why are we spending all this time talking about values again as all like but like this is part of like the process, right? And getting everybody together. So um thank you all so much for this conversation. I hope this has given you something to think about, kind of regardless of where your specific region is in the evolution of system of care and strategic planning. We have just 20 minutes left. I want to make sure I answer all your questions. So let me get back to our slideshow here. Okay, so hopefully this has given you all a lot to think about. As it relates to your grant, and particularly the 25 to 27 grant, where we are now saying you have to put a little bit of money towards strategic planning. Lots of different things you could do with that money. You could develop or update a local strategic plan. That would be like, we're going to spend this much time, and here's it's going to pay for staff time. You could align with a state strategic plan. Admittedly, the current plan is maybe not a great example of a strategic plan, one that is actionable. So I am committed, and I know Anna and the council are committed to getting a better, more actionable plan for the state by January. I can't tell you what that's going to look like quite yet. But once that is released, hopefully there'll be something in there that your region can say, hey, we see ourselves in this particular activity, this strategy, something about it will hopefully be useful to you. You could use grant funding to fund implementation of specific strategies or actions. It sounds like some of you are doing that. You could put it towards sustainability planning, kind of thinking about, what is going to see this plan through its life through, 2030, 2035, being really future oriented. You could use it to engage community around strategic planning, to develop metrics, get some data into your plan, or to help communicate about the plan, about your plan, about the state plan. Again, you choose your own adventure here. There's a lot of options for you, regardless of kind of, where you're at. Okay, here are a few questions that I've heard thus far. Chris, yes.
Maybe you're about to get to it.
Okay.
I was just going to be like, do we have like a specific percentage or like, because I'm covering 12 counties and just, is there any around like what
No
money we need to
minimum.
spend?
No minimum. Yeah. And I think I didn't put this question on here, but like, I think some of you are probably wondering, like, a lot of this is like staff time work that's already paid for, right? So, I mean, you could put like $1, right? I mean, that would be some sort of allocation. If I was making the decision on it, I would be like, okay, like as long as you've explained like how you're going to do the work outside of that $1. But it's not just me, right? There'll be other people kind of reviewing those implementation plans, but
What if we wanted to pull our youth and families? We have 12 counties. What if we wanted to pay to pull our youth and family leadership committee together to discuss?
Right.
Like centrally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally.
They're the most passionate people. And so like, as far as driving the bus, it's so nice just hearing them have conversation and stuff and being able to pull them together. That might actually be nice.
Yeah. And that was actually an example in that second question. What kinds of things can we spend money on? Here are just a few examples. External facilitation or contractors. Some of you have talked about that. Communication efforts, staff time, community engagement efforts, collaborating across counties or regions. Yeah, thinking kind of creatively about how you can, particularly those of you who cover multiple counties, thinking about how you bring people together in the spirit of strategic planning. Do we have to develop a plan? No, you do not have to. If you're like, this is not the right time for whatever reason, right? It's a good practice, right? We would encourage you to do that, but you're not required to at all. And if that feels like the answer for your region, then that's fine. I think, then we'd probably be expecting you to just be supporting communication about the state plan once that's released. And then finally, I've also heard a question about, do we have to align with the state plan? This would be the next plan, right, that we release in January. No, nope. If you want to go do something on your own, that's totally fine too. And again, in the spirit of collaboration, coordination, if there are pieces of the state plan that you can pick up and use that feel relevant to you, that would be great. Any other questions that I've missed? Okay. Here's an example. I mean, there have been other examples today. This is based on the pillars of the current state plan. So there were 4 pillars in that plan. Here are some examples of strategies, right? But we've had some nice examples of this today. All right, some resources. I'll make sure you get all these slides and have the links. This Building Systems of Care, a primer. I think a lot of you know this. If you haven't, it is a very long document, but has a lot of really good information in it. Pages 165 to 190, 191 of this document specifically talk about strategic planning and system of care. Community Toolbox, Collective Impact Forum has been mentioned. They also have a lot of great resources about strategic plan. I pulled out 2 kind of worksheets in particular that I liked, that I saw when I was kind of preparing for this. And then also consider opportunities to align or integrate with related plans. Jennifer, you mentioned this, right? We're going to look at our community health improvement plan and intentionally kind of think about, like, maybe that means we're pulling out the strategies that have already been articulated in our CHIP that apply to our system of care. CCOs also have a comprehensive behavioral health plan. I think some of you have system of care in that plan. Many, maybe you don't. So maybe it's more about, like, trying to get system of care threaded into those plans for your region. There's lots of ways that this could look, but don't forget those 2. There are others as well. And then just a few reminders. If you have not submitted your second invoice, there are just a few regions, I think, that we have not yet paid out. If you're like, did we get the rest of our money? Like, just email me. We have to get that money out of our account by end of June or we lose it. So please, as soon as you possibly can, get us that second invoice. If you don't know if it's you, let me know. Your next report is due April 30th. You'll have one more July 30th, and then we move to the 6-month reporting cycle. Okay, so just 2 more this year, April 30th, June 30th, and then it won't be until January. Hopefully that's good news for you all. Propose implementation plans for your 25 to 27 grant due June 30th. If you are stressing about that date, if you feel like your region could benefit from more time, like, please just let me know. We can definitely work something out. My intent is to get you a signed grant agreement and money out the door by the end of your current grant, which is December 30th. That takes some time, but if that is less of a concern for your region, then just let me know. We can talk about it. And then we will have another learning collaborative on the 18th of July. If you have thoughts about topics for that, please let me know. You know where to get a hold of me. What else do folks have for today? Any questions about any of that?
Hi.
Grant. Yeah.
All right. I thought our grantees had until the end of December and the existing. Okay. So, because I think because our grant got out the door so late, I imagine that's going to happen with many of our grantees. So will there be another report after July 30th? Is that the January 30th report for our existing system of care grant? The final report?
Your final report. So the 23 to 25 grant, your current grant ends December 30th of this year. Your final report on that grant will be due January 30th of 2026.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. And then we'll continue the 6-month reporting period for the 25 to 27 grant. So one less thing for you all to do. Haley.
Yes, hello. I have a question about whether or not I seem to recall, and this just happened this morning, so I'm sorry for not double checking. I'm just seeing if maybe one of y'all can answer faster. But did something change between this new 25-27 and the 23-25 pertaining to like training, like pursuing training for system of care coordinators? And okay, just wondering where would that fall within, like if it's not necessarily DEI related training, but like for example, like being able to attend, like myself being able to attend a training that's going to benefit our system of care, right? Or like networking at, like there's one coming up here in Eugene that's, you know, our local United Way as well as COSA. And unfortunately, we we just don't quite have the budget for me to attend all these trainings without a little bit of support. So just we don't want to use much of it, but we also think that it's important for me to be able to attend some of these networking opportunities.
For
So I was
sure.
wondering where that would fall.
Yeah, I would put that under the governance structure
Got it.
category.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
but that's a great question. I'll make sure that's kind of added to that bucket.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? Okay.
Christy, I don't know if you saw in the chat that Chris asked if they had submitted their second invoice. I was trying to get to it, find it in Teams, but I don't know if you just have it off the top of your head.
Oh, I see. I'm missing some
I
questions.
know we've submitted it. There was a lag or a disconnect somehow, or somebody went on vacation, and I'm hoping it got to you guys.
Yes, we received it in February. Yes, but while I have you, I am still Karen, waiting on your invoice. Amelia, I'm waiting on your invoice. Those are just the last two.
I just shot an email off to our finance person to send that invoice. I knew you were gonna call me out.
We're just trying to give you your money, people.
I appreciate it. It's a strange process for us as a nonprofit because always like our grants and our funding is tied to like a financial report for the grant or like, you know, direct billing for specific expenditures. So this whole like we're just going to give you funds to do the work with is that's very unique for us. It's nice.
And Karen said in the chat that she's sending hers today, so then we'll be all set.
Okay, thanks, Karen.
Disregard my email too. I just emailed you, so disregard.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all so much. I really value and appreciate all of you, especially now. These days are hard, and the fact that we can still have these conversations and still do this really important work just feels like such a nice balm for my soul. So thank you all so much. Hope you have a lovely weekend, and we will see you sometime soon. Okay, bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.